Hi, everybody, and welcome to our very first webinar for 2024. We're very lucky today. We've got the wonderful Nicola McDonald and Adam Spence joining us today from Customer Driven. And we've got an amazing session for you today. The session today is called Riding the Dragon, Taming ChatGPT with Knowledge Management. I think the people I speak to say 2023 was all about hearing about it. 2024 is about solving and applying the applications that are possible, utilising AI and ChatGPT. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of our guests, we hope to spark your interest and actually engage you in the conversation, as well as provide you with some ideas to take back to your respective businesses. To round off the session, we'll have Q&A, and we encourage you all to get thinking and get typing with those questions that you have, and let's throw them at the experts while we've got them here with us. I'm Fran Southwood, CEO of Auscontact, and I will be your moderator today. As we're waiting for everyone to join us, we'll just use the time quickly to run through some housekeeping. Remember to interact with us today. This is such a great opportunity. You've got experts on hand who are here to actually answer those questions that you have, and it helps you maximise the benefit. As you know, you don't need to take too many notes, because not only will you get a recording, but you'll have the opportunity to connect and ask follow-up questions from Nicola and Adam if you want to after the session. So again, a great opportunity to have them here. For you to interact with us, I want you to use the Q&A button or the chat button on the control panel. We're all experts at this now, so we want you to ask questions or make comments for anyone as we go along. If you're like me, if I don't write it down as I'm thinking of it, I'll forget the very best questions that were possible. So write them down, and if they're relevant to what we're actually talking about then and there, I'll jump in and get Nicola and Adam to actually answer or address what it is in real time. If it's about something totally different or more general, we'll keep that for the end of the session. And if we don't have time to get to all of your questions, I promise you, Nicola and Adam will actually do some follow-up, and we can send responses to any questions that are part of that chat with the information that we send out afterwards. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and you have any issues with your internet connection, just click the raise hand button, and one of the Auscontact team will jump in and try and help. The other option is you can revert back to your registration confirmation, which has phone numbers and access codes and all that sort of thing there for you. So I'm going to stop talking. I know we're all here to really hear about the topic and hear from Nicola and Adam. I'm going to introduce them officially as our speakers for today. So welcome. We have Nicola McDonald, who is the head of knowledge management, at Customer Driven, and we also have Adam Spence, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at Customer Driven. Nicola, Adam, thank you for coming today. Welcome. Can't wait to hear about it. I'm going to hand over to you, Adam, and we are going to get this session underway.
Cool. Thank you very much, Fran. So just to sort of set the scene in terms of what Nicola and I are going to tag team with each of you today. Further on from what Fran was saying, we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So we're going to sort of try and get some audience participation to create some conversation. But in terms of what we're going to cover today, and further to the topic is, what is the impact of adding ChatGPT to my knowledge management solution? Where it has gone wrong for others, so really, what are some key things that we can learn from and how to avoid those pitfalls? What, in our view, are the best practices and approaches to enable ChatGPT without the pitfalls? So yes, you can do this, and I know that we're going to cover that off. And the inevitable question, potentially somebody in your organization has gone and said, hey, I think I can use ChatGPT to replace my knowledge management solution. hopefully that will demystify that that's not actually the case. So before we kick off, what we would like to do is to try and create get some feedback from the audience. Oh, there's a little poll, which is really, what is the main primary purpose for investing in knowledge management or looking to invest in knowledge management? And then secondly, what are the problems that you're trying to solve? Like if you are either have a platform in place at the moment, what are you trying to solve? Is it working? And what's the primary purpose? So if you can just jot down those answers, that would be great.
I think in the market at the moment, Adam, some of the things we're certainly hearing around what are people trying to achieve is, KM has certainly always been one of those things that people talk about, single source of truth. We talk about it for our frontline agents. How can they ensure that they're getting the most up-to-date information? My last few webinars with Fran and the team have certainly been more around that omni-channel opportunity. It's certainly been a buzzword in the market for quite some time. How do we get there? And now, obviously, with the likes of ChatGPT and all of those exciting LLMs that are coming out, how can we leverage what we've got from our KM platforms to service these different bots and different integrations? So I would certainly hope or expect that a lot of people are starting to think down that path and see what opportunities are coming for them with their platforms.
Yep.
Definitely an interesting one, isn't it, Nicola? I know we've talked a lot about knowledge management and, the real opportunity around, kind of that staff engagement piece as well. So, what's that support level? What else does it change? What are those opportunities? And as you say, the more emerging tech and innovative application of tech, it suddenly actually lets you look at some of those kind of foundation pieces of knowledge management and what else they contribute to in a whole different way. So yeah, it's interesting.
Certainly interesting. All right.
You can see them popping up now.
Yeah. Self-service for customers, removing unnecessary calls. It's always been an interesting conversation with organizations, and I just picked that one out. There's all great responses coming up. But almost this sense of, can I turn knowledge management outward facing so it's, actually, something that does divert some of those calls. And you've got some organizations that do that really well, particularly around using their, that single source of information. And you've got others that are kind of scared to jump into giving everything to their customers as far as the knowledge. It's interesting.
Yeah. So I think on that point, Fran, Nicola and I have had that chat many a time. So, if you were to rewind 10 years ago, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm showing my age, a little while ago, people would, embark on a program around knowledge management with only a single channel, maybe their contact center to address. Now there's so many different channels that need to leverage that knowledge. So it could be a voice bot, could be a chat bot, it could be retail agents. Yeah, I can see that some of that is coming up. How do you make the knowledge available across multiple different platforms? Consistency, scalability.
Yeah,
everything is changing so fast now. How do we create real-time single source of truth?
Definitely. Well, hopefully we'll be able to solve or provide some guidance on some of those points. There's definitely a few things coming up around just needing to understand what the market looks like and where it's going and how to get there. So we can certainly cover off a few of them throughout the webinar today, I reckon.
Cool. So I think, in terms of, what do we at Customer Driven believe are the key elements for knowledge management? So, probably Nicola's probably got a list of 20 things, but I think she summarized it down to 4, which is, how do you ensure that the knowledge that you're giving out is accurate? And I think there was some of the people referred to consistency and accuracy. Another piece was timeliness. You could probably put that under the accuracy heading as well. Accessibility. Many people look, there's probably multiple different meanings behind accessibility. For me, it's, the ability to surface that knowledge across multiple different channels, all of your, frontline channels, whether it be contact center or retail, as well as digital channels, chatbots, voice bots, control. How do you make sure, and we're going to cover off a little bit further in the session around how do you control that information and content, and how is it ensure that it's quality, and that quality might be different from channel to channel. I don't know whether, Nick, you want to add anything to that, or?
I think you've covered it off there. I think accessibility, as you said, it can mean different things to different people. And one of the big pieces in KM is accessibility, website standards and things like that, making sure that not only is it going to different channels, but we're meeting people's needs as well. So different users having different abilities and different ways of interacting with the content. So that accessibility piece is certainly a big one throughout every kind of KM deployment that we look to do these days as well.
Yep. So, probably the $1 million question, why ChatGPT for knowledge management? How can integrating ChatGPT into your existing KM platform provide benefit? We believe that it can provide significant enhancement and efficiency. And I'm sure that for all of you that have tried, and I'm pretty much everyone on this, I should have asked that. That should be a good poll question one day, friend. Everyone who's used it, why do you like, using it, and why do you find it, easy? It's all to do with the interface, right? So the interface is conversational in the same way that we would communicate as two humans. ChatGPT does that for content, and it allows them to obtain information in a very clear, crisp, and timely manner. ChatGPT is one of many large language models that are in place, and they really gain their knowledge and information from large language sets. So at the moment, ChatGPT is gaining information from the internet. It ingests that large amount of data, and is able to translate it, summarize it, and produce answers to questions. Some of the key attributes of large language models is it's continually learning and absorbing content. As I mentioned, questions can be asked in a natural language way. When combined with advances in speech recognition, you could make that available via a voice bot as well. Can provide a very clear, crisp, and fast answer in a natural way. And the platform and as that knowledge is evolving and that content that it's ingesting, it's continually improving. So, that all sounds really good, and you're probably sitting there saying, hey, that would be fantastic for me to sit across all of the information and provide my answers to my customers. But really, continually learning and observing content from the broader internet probably doesn't sit entirely well with accuracy. Can digest large volumes of content quickly to produce an answer. Where's it getting that information? Where's it getting that content from to produce the answer? Doesn't give me confidence in control. If I work in a regulated industry, do I really, can I really control the answers that are going to be produced? And that's really how do you now get that balance of using the positives, in terms of the interface, but still regain and have accuracy and control. I'm about to go into some examples, but I don't know whether anything to add, Nick, before I keep moving on.
No, I think, when we start talking around why ChatGPT for knowledge management, and we sort of touched on it, those 4 key things that we're looking for: accuracy, accessibility, control, and quality. They're all things that we have with knowledge management. And so as you've gone through and outlined, these are the benefits of ChatGPT, but these are some of the downfalls as to why it's potentially not aligning with our KM strategy. It starts to kind of indicate and point out why, that original question we had on the bottom of our what questions we're going to answer. They're the kinds of things that are going on and the thoughts that are going on in organizations as to, well, can ChatGPT or another LLM be suitable to replace our KM altogether? So as we start to think about some of those elements and those questions, these are the things we start to come back to. So that accuracy of information in your knowledge base, you're going to have information that has been approved, has gone through the right processes, and you can control that information. You know when it's going live, you know who's got access to it, and you know that it has gone through the right governance framework to ensure that it's correct. As we've said here, it's the ChatGPT integrations continually learning and absorbing content from the broader internet. We don't know who's putting that information up. We don't know the accuracy, and that becomes quite a big risk to our businesses. So that's sort of where a lot of the conversation ends at this point, because everyone's sort of saying, well, we can't use ChatGPT for our business because we don't have that governance and that structure. So I'll leave my points there, I suppose, and we'll get into how that can be solved as we continue to move along.
Cool, thank you. So everyone, most of the people on the call, I don't want to go through each of these examples, but I think there are a number of examples for that large enterprises have not had control potentially, and have not had control of the information that large language models have ingested, and through not having that control, there have been a series of use cases where it hasn't worked well. It's ingested data that has bias for different varying reasons, which have then caused potentially PR disasters. So I won't go through each of these, but I think it just wanted to reiterate that garbage in, garbage out. It's all about how do you have the right level of control and ingest the right quality content with ChatGPT. So before I hand over to Nick to take us through the next few slides, the key benefit of knowledge management that, and I think we've sort of covered this off, is having complete control of the information source. And I think, once you have that complete control of the knowledge source, ChatGPT can give you is a great way of ingesting that knowledge, and to be able to give you the ability to control and manage the way in which you get the response in what is a natural interface. I think, Nick, I'm going to hand over to you for the next slide, unless you've got anything to add.
No, perfect. Thanks, Adam. So, we've kind of just gone through, as Adam said, all of the things that we've been learning over the last 12 months and of ChatGPT and large language models as a whole, and how that has obviously worked for some and not worked in other cases. When we start to think about how can we use it for our knowledge management platform, we've been working with our partner, or one of our partners, USU, who are leading in the market in their digital push-to-web strategies. So one of the reasons that we've partnered with USU is that they have a really great heritage, a long-standing heritage, I suppose, in software and IT services. And they actually, as a knowledge management platform, started with their website and their customer self-service modules before they actually rolled back into being a knowledge management provider. So with that comes some really good benefits. They've got some really great experience in all of these kinds of things, and they've been front of the market when it comes to AI and integrations. They've got the people in all of these teams that are across it. So they were very quick to come to me and start talking to me around large language models and how we can make it work for our knowledge management platforms. I was so skeptical. I'd heard, I'm sure, Adam kind of skipped past it when we were talking about all the issues, but, I would hazard a guess that most of us had heard of the horror story of some code from a very big organization that should not have been put into ChatGPT, and it got leaked quite quickly. And that was obviously the one story that, a lot of people have heard, and that makes us very hesitant to say, well, should we be connecting to an LLM like that? So what you can see here, we've got the internet. The internet is a fantastic source of information. It's got all of the information that we need. But what we want to do is we want to be able to have the benefits of a large language model, and it can be any. We are not, only talking about ChatGPT. But if we were using that as an example, you can connect and get the benefits of that large language model, so our conversational AI and generative AI benefits, and present that information to our customers. But what we do is we point it, when it is on that particular page, we're pointing it into our knowledge base. Now, we also want to bear in mind what a large language model that is an open source large language model is consuming is still going to go out to the internet. So we still need to be very careful around what we are giving it access to and what we're allowing it to see. So use case one is, how can we use it for our end customers on our website? So in that case, we can point it into very specific information and say, when you are responding to us from here, this is the only information we want you to source. We're still getting all the benefits of all its knowledge of how to have a conversation and how to carry on questions. And what we see a lot of, and one of the benefits is obviously that someone can say, tell me about X, and then they can ask a follow-on question without having to give it that context again. The bot knows what we're still talking about and that our question flows through. So we can use all of that benefit and only give it, ring fence that information. So this is the only information we want you to source. And it's information that you would typically already have had presented online. ChatGPT, for example, has already consumed it. It's no risk to the business. It's just giving your users and your customers another way to actually access that information. So if they prefer to chat to your chatbot rather than search or go through FAQs or, whatever other options you've got on your website, they can access it that way. The second use case that we're also starting to talk about is how can we use these bots internally, and can we get it to give access to our entire knowledge base, but how can we do that securely? So that's where we start talking about more of your secure LLMs and connecting them so that you can have it present to your knowledge base and have your bot internally. So I know some people were talking in our poll earlier around we've got so much information, we've got a knowledge base, but there is so much there that users can't find information. So, option A might be, let's do a complete redesign of our knowledge base. Let's rewrite the content. Let's go down that path. That might be feasible for some and it might not be for others. So then, well, what's another way that we can get our users to access that information, to see it and consume it without them having that issue of their search results being too cluttered and can't find what they're after? So by giving us a secure LLM that has access into our knowledge base, how can we get that then through to our users? And a lot of the time, bots are becoming more and more common and more people are getting more used to responding and interacting with them. That is becoming one of those common search functionalities that we're seeing. So when I go in and speak to people about new knowledge bases, we talk about giving users a good search functionality. We always talk about Google-like searches because that's what our users are used to. We talk about navigating through folder structures. We talk about giving people options to navigate in visual ways and things like that. It is just becoming the fourth way of navigating information. So it doesn't, at this point, we certainly don't believe it's making our knowledge base obsolete. As we were sort of talking to before, our knowledge base is still that single source of truth. It's still that area where we know we've got accurate, governed, perfect information. It's just around how we're able to utilize that now as that single source of truth. So from here, I probably already covered off half of this, but our knowledge management platforms, they enable us to design information. They enable us to create our templates, to have consistency across the database. They give us the ability to really set our human workforce up for success. And that has been the key area. If you speak to any knowledge management team today, that is what their focus is giving our agents the information they need as quickly as possible so that they're not wasting time trying to search for it and putting customers on hold and all of that. Where does this take us? Where is this going? How do we prepare ourselves for integrating to large language models? Well, we do need to be able to start to think about our digital workforce, so our bots and our machines that are going to start consuming that. And a key learning at this point is, well, we need to know that our writing skill is going to suit both our machines and our human workforce. So at this point, contact centers are still there. They are still existing. They are still needed. We still need humans to do a lot of these interactions. So that's not going anywhere. We still need to be able to write concisely for these users. But now let's just think about, is the way that we're writing for our human users going to be suitable for our machine users? So we spent a bit of time and a lot of research with across ourselves and with USU to talk about, well, what does writing for machines look like? And as I was putting this pack together with Adam, we had a good conversation about this, and I sort of said, well, this doesn't make me fall off my chair. At the end of the day, these examples are still things that we design for and we consider for humans. It is just adding slight tweaks to what we've previously been writing for. So I don't see a drastic change. If you're already adhering to good writing standards and good designs and you've got that consistency in your database, it shouldn't be a huge change in order to write for machines as well. But it is just adding that extra layer of consideration when we're about to publish that document and we're aware that this is a document that our machine is going to consume. Have we designed as best as possible for both scenarios? So we first talk about clarity and conciseness. One of my customer-driven KM design principles already is simple to consume, easy to understand. So we already want the language to be simple. We already want to be very clear and straightforward. There is no point, rambling on for days and days like I am right now in your knowledge base, because your users can't read all of that while we've got someone on the phone to them. So if we're thinking about a machine now consuming that, we want to remove as much of the noise as possible, because we don't want to give it anything extra that's potentially going to confuse its response. If it thinks that it's important, it may still present that for us. So we want to be very concise in our responses and simple language. So language that is going to be very easily transmitted across those channels. We look at the structure of the content. So we want to make sure that we're using effective headings and subheadings. Depending on the type of content that we're creating, we want to make sure that it's consistently utilizing those heading functions. So you don't want to be using those big headings in one section, a subheading in the next, and then confusing the system as to whether or not that's the main chunk of our information or if it is a subset of that information. We need to use descriptive headings as well and organize the content logically so that the machine can understand what bits of information relate to each other. We also talk about, bullet lists. I mean, that's very common in most knowledge bases anyway. We talk about bullet lists being single steps of information, particularly for a procedure. You want one instruction per bullet point and very logical steps of information. The bullet lists certainly help our machine to digest that information. So the machines need to be able to take those clear and concise steps and consume that to present back to our customers. We've got consistency, obviously consistent terminology, not using jargon, things like that, so that our machine knows we're still talking about topic A. And definitions. It's really important that we give definitions and, potentially glossary type documents so that the machine can consume that to understand all of those important definitions to your business. One thing that is, slightly different from the way that my team particularly would work with knowledge bases is the use of examples. So we typically try to strip that back and keep that in the general background type documents, so that, when people are learning about particular subjects, they can get that information through. So the use of examples, we would really restrict to different document types. But if we are writing for our machines, and depending on what access level they've got and what documents we're pointing them to, we need to make sure that there is a good example for each scenario so that it can consume that, understand it, and once again, present that back to our users. Already sort of touched on avoiding ambiguity. So making sure that everything is very clear. We don't want to be vague. We want to make it as easy as possible. And using active voice is very important in this case as well. So giving very clear instructions and making explanations very direct is key here. We've also then got metadata and keywords. So that's just really helping to categorize and tag that information so that it is all making sense. Now, that is very common in a KM platform. It's just around whether those keywords and tags are going to be relevant to that machine as well, as to whether or not we need to have another little bit of an exercise to streamline that across the knowledge base. And finally, we've got testing and feedback. So feedback is critical in any KM platform. We always want our users to be providing feedback. I would always say to a customer, if we're not getting feedback, it's a sign of an unengaged environment. So we want to make sure that users are continually providing feedback. There's always going to be something, whether it be a typo or something that just doesn't make sense. And we want our users to be letting us know. And that's no different with our machines as well. So we want to have a feedback loop where we can see how accurate those responses have been and help the machine to continually learn. There is always tweaking that needs to go on with any of these large language models to ensure that our bots are still responding as accurately as possible and giving good quality responses. So this can be done through either a feedback loop at the end of the interaction, allowing your customers to provide that information, but we would also recommend there's a bit of a testing phase, obviously, with any release of something like this that needs to happen. So we can test how well our AI can interpret the content and adjust the content based on that finding before we proceed. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. That's sort of our high level changes that we might need to consider as we start to write for multiple workforces, our digital and our human workforces. And that's probably key to the first step that people need to consider as they start to move into this journey of where is our content and are we ready for interacting with our machine workforce. We speak to, when we are speaking with our clients about this, we talk to them about being intentional about the information that you put into the public domain. So we really want to make sure that any information that is going out has been signed off and is ready to go public. And that is the benefit of, as we sort of saw, the ability to say, this is where we want you to source the information from. Through permissioning in the knowledge base, we can only provide 1 or 2 documents if that's all we're sending out onto our website. Or we can give it absolutely everything, but we need to make sure that there is nothing in there that is internal only. So we really need to think about permissioning and locking down what we want our bot or our large language model to be consuming. Throughout conversations internally at Customer Driven, one of the favorite sayings has come up is, think of ChatGPT or your large language models like you've hired an amazing employee, but they are the world's worst gossip. Don't share any information that you want kept internally. So if it is secure, keep it secure. Make sure we've got those permissions in place so that we're not sending anything out that we're not intending to go out. Or if we're using a bot internally, and that is a risk, we want to make sure that we've chosen an LLM that is suitable for our use case.
Nicola, there's a comment in the chat from Natasha, and it is specifically in relation to what you've just covered in relation to writing for machines. And I hear it myself. There's this whole piece around, well, how do we make sure what we're doing now actually prepares us for, that next step, that next opportunity? It's really about formulating a really clear vision and strategy when you're actually writing, and how you structure it, how you actually prepare yourselves as an organization. Even if you're not quite ready yet, to, kind of, you might have organizational constructs and things that need to happen before you step into here. There's a lot of work that you've just covered off, really, that actually help prepare you and set you up for success in that space as well. Stuff
Definitely.
in their control.
Definitely. And that's the thing. If you think about what you're working on right now, there's no point in sitting back and waiting and saying, oh, this will come, it's probably 2-3 years down the track before we get approval and sign off to go ahead with something like this. But the thing is, in 2-3 years, when you're ready to go, think of all of that content that you've got to go through. So if you start to think about that now, all of those content updates and changes that we're making, just with all of our, standard BAU changes, we could start to make this a little bit easier on ourselves when the business does sign us off and say, yep, let's go, and have thought about, well, what do we think is important? What do we think we need to change? What metadata do we think is going to be important for these steps, and start to put that in place so that it's just, those minor changes and changes to our templates and things like that happen slowly, rather than getting to that, I suppose, start line and literally having to sprint to the end to try and meet what our business is trying to achieve. So, definitely when we get the sign off, there's going to be things that have changed and other things that we need to consider. I'm sure we're all well aware of how quickly the LLMs are changing daily. I know we kind of have an internal project going on that requires a large language model, and I think every second day I'm hearing we're using a different one because there's new and better and it suits our use case better. So it is, things are going to change. So it will always have a big amount of work at that point that we go ahead, but we can certainly be prepping and starting to consider that now to make that point a little bit easier on ourselves.
Certainly creates best practice internally anyway, as a starting point. If you can have all of that structure in place, you're well placed.
100%.
So Nick, I feel like this is the drum roll slide.
Beautiful. Yes. So we can tame the dragon. We certainly believe, if we come back to taming our dragon, on riding our dragon, I should say, we certainly think that it is possible. And we are seeing great use cases coming out of USU of how we can do that. We're going to gain accuracy of information by limiting the information that our large language model is using to generate the answers. So by utilizing our knowledge base and utilizing the information that we've already approved and sent through all of those workflows and got everyone to agree upon, we're going to be able to ensure that our large language model that is being used is only sourcing the accurate information that we want it to source. We need to set up our digital workforce for success, and we need to design those knowledge artifacts. So as we've just been speaking about, we can start doing that now, and we can start to consider what that looks like, regardless when we think that's going to come into play with our organisation. And it's really great to start considering how we design for both workforces there. Governance is key. Governance is king, I should say. Be clear on what we want to be presenting to our large language model, and be clear on what is internal only or secure information, and make sure we have a very defined governance process and sign-off process to identify those areas. That is going to be having your governance process locked down and business approval gates. It's going to be how we can manage to keep secure information secure and external information available to our bot. So that's probably also another learning, is that we really need to get those sessions in play with all of the key stakeholders to understand how we're going to be able to manage that internally.
And then finally.
Oh, that's me. Sorry, I thought you were jumping in there, Adam. ChatGPT is a tool that can certainly be used alongside our KM. I think I've said it probably 100 times throughout the last 40 minutes already. KM isn't going anywhere. We can utilize this to our benefit of saying we can govern our ChatGPT or our large language model. We can give it the accurate and approved information. So KMS is certainly there as the baseline, as that single source of truth, as our Holy Grail, Holy Bible, whatever you want to call it. But just like our human employees, it certainly needs our governance and structures in place to make sure that we're able to produce those reliable, accurate, and consistent responses through to our bots and our customers. As a KM team, our approach was previously we need to understand our audience, make sure that we have a complete picture of how they are utilising their knowledge base. And then we would use our combination of best practice and our governance practices in line with whichever technology is leading at that point in time in order to serve that information in an easy to consume way. This hasn't changed. This is still what we are doing. There is no need to throw the baby out with bathwater. The KM tools and the best practice methodologies that are in place are certainly still relevant. It is, once again, said this a few times, but it is just making sure that now we consider multiple different channels, multiple audiences, and making sure that we keep that in mind when we proceed with those content updates and content changes in our KM solutions.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I think I'm just going back to some of the questions that people asked, very early on. Hopefully we've gone and shown how ChatGPT can be used to complement a KM solution. So it's sort of like a 1 + 1 is greater than 2. I'm just looking at some of the initial questions, Fran, from the session.
From the poll, yeah.
Yeah,
and look, I think that if we reflect on 2023. There was a whole lot of noise, a whole lot of information, a whole lot of misinformation, a whole lot of almost asymmetry right across the environment where people, there was this big shiny disco ball called AI, ChatGPT, and we were hearing lots of, it could be this and you could use it for that, and maybe we could do this. And what we're seeing 2024 shape up, we're hoping that it's going to be the year of action. We're actually going to see the real opportunities start to emerge. What are you guys seeing? You are on the ground, boots on. Where are we seeing great examples of this working within organisations? Who is stepping into it? Are they starting small before they jump in? What's kind of what are you seeing within the environment? Because again, we all know that there's opportunity here, right? We know it can do great things for our businesses. We know it can actually influence the bottom line. We've got execs trying to say, go do this shiny thing. We've got people in the mix saying, well, how do we step into it? What's your advice? Because I think there's so much opportunity, but it's almost like, how do we step into it? Yeah, you know what I mean?
100%. It is one of those things that everyone comes to us and says, we've been told that we want to do it or we want to do it. But as you say, what does that mean? Where are we starting? What is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things we're currently working on with one of our clients is the internal bot. So that's what they've decided. They can present this internally. So that one does have a requirement for it to be a very secure LLM, so that nothing is being consumed and then presented elsewhere in the world from ChatGPT or anything like that. And how can we present that to, and I think it was one of the questions potentially around how can we present that to our users so that they can find information easier. So they've got a database, it's so big, we can't easily find information. And at this point, given we are wanting to drive AI, this is the opportunity that has been identified, is what the business unit has sort of spoken with us about. So we are seeing it being used to solve some usability problems that have potentially arisen over the years as more knowledge comes in and the database gets a little bit scary. And that's certainly a good place to start, because we can do a lot of training while you've still got tweaking, I suppose, for the large language model while you've still got humans who understand their job, hopefully, to an extent where they could pick up and say, well, I'm pretty sure that is the wrong answer, that I shouldn't be communicating to my customer. While you've got that test and learn kind of that space. So they'll be releasing, once it's ready, we'll release into more of that senior team so that we can start with the tweaking at a point that we've got confidence that users would know when the response isn't quite right. And then they may expand that out. As for presenting to customers, it's certainly on a lot of my conversations that I'm having at the moment, but I personally haven't started that journey in Australia with any of our clients. But I know, Adam, you've seen in your previous life a few good deployments of similar AI approaches.
Yeah, I think probably one of the big emerging trends is how do I combine real-time input? So with the advances of, real-time speech recognition and intent detection, how do I use that intent? So, capabilities like agent assist. I've got knowledge in my organization. How do I surface that real time through at the right time for an agent through a conversation? How do I get the balance right also in terms of the amount of content that I surface? I think you're going to see knowledge really come to the fore, where it will be surfaced, more as an advisor and an assistant rather than a triggered search. So more hints and tips through conversations, I think, is a big trend that we're hearing and seeing from our customers, both for, also for one of the initial conversations is, how do I make sure that the content is almost real time, and we see that as a great mechanism to make sure that real time content is surfaced during a conversation. So one of the customers that we're working for is, how do they combine that real time agent assist capabilities with knowledge? So that's another big trend in the industry for sure.
Oh, that's good. There's a question here for you both, and Nicola, it goes back to what you were talking about, really quarantine or ring fencing the internal information. So the question specifically around what's the best way to quarantine your environment to keep it yours and private, to actually build that LLM/KM on, and is it even really possible? Now, we know it is possible, right? But it requires that conscious, real understanding. So, yeah.
Definitely. And I suppose it really is going to depend on where you're coming from as well. So I can tell you hand on heart that I know that a product like USU can do it very easily. But if you're coming from other knowledge management areas and it might be a SharePoint or it might be another platform, we really need to consider how the information architecture and the overall structure of that database has been set up. But it can be as simple as I said earlier, permissions. So let's say we have a document, we have one document, we say this knowledge block, this section of information is going to go to this channel, this section of information is available for this channel, and this section is here. So based on those permissions, we're able to easily see what content exists. And so when we talk about how to handle a payment, for example, we can, as an author, see, well, we've got a block of information that is relevant for our contact center. We've got a block of information that's going to a chatbot. Whenever payment information gets updated, I need to make sure that I've updated all of these channels, and it's all in the one place, which is really great. There can be ways of doing it where you do set up a completely separate space in that environment where it can only see what is there. And so if you are worried about potential cross-contamination of certain things, then that's probably the more secure way to go. So there's definitely different options, and it is really going to come down to the platform that you're directing your large language model into as to how we can go down that path. But always happy to come in and have a chat if anyone is in a position where they are starting to think that and want some guidance. It would certainly come down to having a look at the environment and getting an understanding of that before we can provide that solid advice for them.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, look, here's an interesting question from an anonymous attendee. How far are we from a future where knowledge management and ChatGPT replace contact center agents? Now, I don't know. You guys have both been around for a long time. I'm not going to say we've all been here a long time, right? How many times have we heard contact center agents are going to be replaced, or we're not going to need? I think 10 years ago, I think I had someone tell me that my organisation at the time wouldn't have calls within 10 years. I'm like still waiting for any reduction in calls in that organisation. But question, how far away? Is there a future? I think I saw a report come out only last week that actually said the heightened need for human interaction is actually counterbalancing some of the opportunities, and it's really still about that low fruit. And the net effect of complexity means people are still needed. So, but I'd love your viewpoint on that question. I love it. It's a topical one.
Do you want to kick off, Adam?
I was about to say I want you to go first.
Okay.
You go first, and then I'll compliment it.
Okay. I mean, they're all just my thoughts, and as to how true that is, I hope no one's going to hold me to it in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. But I agree. I think as a human, I don't always want to interact with a bot. And if I've had an experience myself with a particular company, I'm sure it wouldn't take anyone more than 2 guesses to get the right one, where I could only interact with a bot, and it drove me insane to the point that I went to their competitor, even though I was told this was the company I had to go through in the particular area that I was trying to get in. I was told that no other provider would be suitable in this area, and I could only speak to a bot, and it was not understanding what I was wanting. And I just wanted to speak to a human, and no matter how many times I asked for it, it wouldn't give it to me. But if I think about those experiences, there are times where humans are needed, and sometimes the bot hasn't got the ability to have the right empathy or understand the right path. Now, obviously, as we start to see more developments and things are changing rapidly, I think we'll be getting more of those things becoming low-hanging fruit, and that the bots will be able to take more of that. But I still think there's always going to be complex things that humans are needed for. But that's my own thoughts on it. Adam might feel differently, but I don't.
Yeah, like Fran, you said, I've been around doing this stuff for a little while. I think probably one of the things that you see emerging is maybe this whole natural language interface replacing traditional journeys, which might have meant Adam had to go into his internet banking, go down a couple of menus, click something. Years ago that was a phone call. Now it's evolved to I go through a self-service menu and option. I think that will evolve to I just tell a bot, and the bot will activate and do that. So I think you're going to see improved experiences for self-service come through these capabilities. But also I agree with Nick that there will be a line in the sand where that will probably, that line might keep moving a little bit over years to year on year. But I think it's going to sort of enhance the experience for a different type of journey than it is going to encroach into the contact center. So.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think it's actually going to heighten the skills we need as well. So, again, how do we sort of focus on that? Some other great questions here. A question here from Nick. What do you recommend in terms of operational teams or people to build and manage a knowledge base? I.e., should it have a full-time person running the knowledge base? And who should be running the content? How often is it updated? Those sorts of things. And I guess the answer is going to be it depends, Nick. Depends on your size, depends on your scale, depends on your everything. But
you've heard my response
over to you
too many times. That question is how long is a piece of string is usually what I come back with. But in general, most organizations go through change regularly, right? Things are changing daily. That's why you have change teams and you have all these people running all of these different projects in the back end of your business. So typically what we do see is that most organizations would have at least one person managing their knowledge base. There are some, and customer driven offer a managed service for clients who it just doesn't seem feasible to have a knowledge management person sitting there full time. And so we manage updates and comms and reports and all that sort of stuff from the knowledge base for them. So there are some scenarios where you might say, it's not right, but we can outsource. I think it is very important to have someone who is responsible for your knowledge. You need to have that consistency. So one of the things, we want to make sure that templates are used correctly, particularly now writing for machines as well. We need someone who has the knowledge, who understands that the document needs to be structured in this way. And if you just have people coming in and out from different teams doing it, you're going to lose that consistency across the database. So for a standard contact center, if we think about, maybe it's not a standard contact center, maybe a large contact center, the 150, 200 seats and there's constant change, you might have a team of 3 or 4 knowledge analysts who are managing that content. It's the content updates that come from change across the business. It's the feedback management, making sure our end users are engaged and responding to them and making sure that we update the tool to make sure it is suiting them. And then comms and reports and making sure that the tool is working as it should. As we start to think about, and I think this might actually come to the next question as well, but I'm going to try and combine them together. Someone has asked a question about how do those changes impact our large language model. I think that starts to just change the role slightly of our knowledge management team to start to needing to understand a little bit of the prompt engineering and the engineering in the back end to make sure that we have not impacted anything. But I would anticipate once we've got our prompts pretty set in stone for our large language model, updates to our content shouldn't impact the large language model as long as it's constantly getting the updates. So it has that constant access to your knowledge base. We shouldn't see too much impact from an update of content to our large language model, but it is something that our knowledge management teams would need to be across to make sure that any changes that may require a change to our prompts, they could be something that could potentially sit with them. Now that's, it could be with them, it could be somewhere else in the business, and we just need to make sure that those two teams are talking. That's your other option as well. But yeah, at this point, with an internal LLM, we haven't seen too many impacts from content changes coming through to that model, if that makes sense.
I think, there's so much still to learn, but such opportunity. And I think, the question we all had earlier around when's it replacing, when does this replace? I think what we're seeing more and more is, what we're building as far as knowledge management and solutions are still about standard practice, right? You talked about consistency, you talked about, making sure they're following that process, etc. Where there still is, that need for human is about that empowerment around stepping outside of standard practice. And actually, you can't write for that for some instances. For some you can, and maybe, who knows, in 12 months' time. But at the moment, there's still that real need for the human understanding to actually transition from a customer, whether it's through, the need for empathy, the need for, really kind of taking on that human factor. I don't see it going away anytime soon. I certainly see it changing. I am mindful of time. We have had some great questions, some great chat. Nicola, Adam, thank you as always. To everybody that came along, thank you. We will be sending out a link to the recording for you. If you've got any follow-up questions, we'll include details of ways you can actually connect with Adam and Nicola. They're absolutely bang on the money with this stuff, and more than happy to help. Even if it is just about talking through some, further elements of those questions. But thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
everybody.